Abel Javier, Oliger Pressas, Michael Clegg. Those are just three right-backs who we have been blessed to witness over the last 23 years. Are they the three best right-backs since 2000? No, absolutely not. They are among the most error-prone that I've witnessed at the highest level during that time, hence why I included them for comic effect. And it's that kind of searing wit and intellect that means that you should immediately subscribe to this channel, and to my second channel, Alfie Potsama, without even a second's hesitation. Just do it now, and turn on notifications. Last month, back when Arsenal were still in a title race, I began a new series by taking a look at the greatest goalkeepers in world football since 2000, in which I started with that exact same naff introduction. Apologies about that, but really do still subscribe. Today is the turn of the right-backs though, who, along with left-backs, have undergone a major transformation over the past couple of decades. At the beginning of the millennium, it used to be said that fullbacks were often the least talented and least important players in a team's starting 11. As Jamie Carragher put it, no one grows up wanting to be a Gary Neville. That is no longer the case. Well, not necessarily that they grow up wanting to be Gary Neville, but fullbacks are now some of the most talented and important players at some of the world's biggest clubs, taking on far more responsibilities than merely keeping their opposite number quiet. This series is based on the quality and quantity of a player's performances since 2000, so someone like Roland Nilsson misses out despite being a great right-back who played during the 2000s because he was already past his best when the millennium began, as do the likes of Reece James and Trent Alexander-Arnold, as despite their accomplishments at the tender ages of 23 and 24, they haven't yet played enough football to crack my top 7. Without further ado then, here are, in my view, and in my view only, and you will undoubtedly disagree which is a good thing, the 7 greatest right-backs since 2000, with some honourable mentions thrown in, just for good measure. 7th, Maicon. As thrilling as it was to watch a young Gareth Bale brutally violate Maicon over 2 legs at Tottenham, and to witness a star being born, it is remarkable, particularly here in England, how much damage 180 minutes of football did to the Brazilian's reputation. Prior to that, you may recall, and the reason why Bale's performance was considered to be so spectacular was because Maicon was universally regarded as being one of the best fullbacks on the planet. A tall and athletic attacking fullback who was so tough to contain down the right flank, for 3 years during his prime, he started ahead of Dani Alves for Brazil, despite the pair of them being almost exactly the same age. That doesn't happen unless you are seriously special, and though he lacked Alves' longevity, which few can match in fairness, that is exactly what Maicon was. The great nephew of Internacional and Brazil legend, Valdemiro, Maicon began his career at Cruzeiro, going on to star for Monaco, Inter Milan, and AS Roma. His best years undoubtedly came at Inter, where Maicon spent 6 seasons, made 249 appearances, won 4 Serie A titles, and a UEFA Champions League. Named in the UEFA and FIFA World 11s in 2010, as well as winning the UEFA Club Defender of the Year award, only a slightly early decline, beginning when Maicon was about 30 or 31, prevents him from ranking any higher in this 7. 6th, Kyle Walker. One of only a couple of active right-backs in this 7, Kyle Walker is a player who is in some ways difficult to assess. At Tottenham, despite twice making the PFA Team of the Year and being heralded as one of the best right-backs in the Premier League, I always felt that he was a bit too hot-headed at times, slightly rash, and over-reliant on his remarkable recovery pace. There is the occasional glimpse of that still at Manchester City, but by and large, Walker has become a much more refined and much less error-prone player at the Etihad. One of the fastest players I would contest, possibly in the entire history of the sport, the highest praise of Walker is perhaps how much opposition forwards hate playing against him. Many of the world's best forwards, including Neymar, have expressed that openly, describing him as one of, or indeed, their toughest opponent, but you just have to watch the way in which they alter their games against him to see that bear out in reality. Walker is the only fullback that I've ever seen who Kylian Mbappe will no longer look to knock the ball past and beat in a foot race because he has tried that and he knows how it ends. Soon to turn 33, it will be interesting to see when Walker's pace starts to desert him, as we haven't seen that yet, and how or if he is able to adapt his game. Even if his career was to end tomorrow, though, I think that he's good value for a spot in 6, based upon the more than 600 games that he has already played for both club and country, and all that he has achieved in that time. 5th, Cafu. Alright, put your pitchforks away for now and hear me out. Cafu is, quite possibly, the best right-back in this 7, and I would argue a top 10 right-back of all time. He is also 52 years old though, which means that his professional career began in 1990, a full 10 years before the start of the relevant period, and despite outstanding longevity, his Brazil career still ended in 2006, and his club career in 2008. In fact, given that Cafu turned 30 in the year 2000, he has done remarkably well to make this 7 at all. He does so because he aged like a fine wine, and even into his mid to late 30s, he still had more energy, enthusiasm, and stamina than most players do in their prime. Brazil's most capped player of all time, having made 142 appearances for the Seleção, Cafu was the last Brazilian to lift the World Cup, having captained the country to glory in 2002. His only clubs, post-2000, were Roma and AC Milan, but Cafu won Serie A titles with both of them, a Champions League with Milan, and he made the FIFPro World 11 in 2005 at the grand old age of 35. 4th, Gianluca Zambrotta. An outstanding two-footed attacking fullback who was as comfortable at left-back as he was at right-back, or indeed at wing-back, Gianluca Zambrotta perhaps doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves outside of Italy, but Italians know a quality defender when they see one. Zambrotta's downplayed legacy might have something to do with the fact that, at his only club outside of Italy, namely Barcelona, he was fairly underwhelming, but 2 seasons does not a footballer make. At his best, which was probably with Juventus, Zambrotta was quick, tenacious, defensively sound, and a constant attacking threat with his energy and deliveries into the box. He played a fair bit of football before 2000, about 150 appearances for Como, Bari and Juventus, plus 3 caps for Italy, but he was at his best in the early to mid-2000s, playing a key role in Italy's 2006 World Cup win, and even after a slightly underwhelming stint at Barca, he went on to spend 4 seasons at AC Milan, lifting a 3rd Serie A title, before retiring in 2012. 3rd, Javier Zanetti. One of the greatest right-backs of all time, as with Cafu, it is only age that prevents Zanetti from ranking even higher in this 7. Zanetti made his club debut in 1992 and his international debut in 1994, and he turned 27 in the year 2000, so once again, that ought to have made it tough for him even to feature in a 7 of this ilk, but Zanetti's longevity is the stuff of legend. He continued to play and star at the highest level, with Inter Milan until 2014, just a couple of months shy of his 41st birthday. In fact, the 1,115 official career appearances that Zanetti made is the 14th most in the entire history of the sport, and the 6th most among outfield players. No outfield player with more appearances than Zanetti played exclusively in the world's most competitive and prestigious top flights. A 3-club man, Zanetti began his career with Talleres before moving on to Banfield in the 1990s, but he is best associated with Inter Milan. Brought to the San Siro in 1995, Zanetti went on to spend 19 years with the club, during which time he played under 19 different coaches. A tireless, complete, and supremely intelligent fullback, Zanetti was dogged in his defensive duties, remarkably level-headed, he was only sent off twice in 19 years at Inter Milan, and a brilliant ball carrier. As both a modern or traditional fullback, and Zanetti bridged both of those eras, there was next to nothing that he couldn't do. His intelligence allowed him to play virtually anywhere on the pitch, and in his later years, due to a combination of his pace beginning to wane and the emergence of the aforementioned Maicon, Zanetti was played increasingly in central and holding midfield. Nonetheless, right-back was his primary position, and the one in which he deservedly features in this series. 2nd, Dani Alves. There was next to nothing to split the top 2 in this 7, who I would imagine about half of you were able to guess by this point, despite them being very different players. In the end, Alves just dropped into second for me, despite being by far the most impressive offensive fullback since 2000 over that period as a whole. A classic attacking and adventurous Brazilian fullback, during his breakout season at Bahia and 6 seasons with Sevilla, Alves became the most expensive right-back of all time and Barcelona's third most expensive signing of all time when he joined the club in 2008. At Barcelona, Alves transformed into something altogether much more special, forming a spectacular and routinely unplayable relationship with Lionel Messi on Barcelona's right flank. Following just shy of 400 appearances at the Camp Nou, Alves joined Juventus, PSG, Sao Paulo, returned to Barca to complete that milestone, and now plays for Pumas in Mexico, aged 40. In total, Alves has made over 1,000 appearances at club and international level, and counting, and his peak is firmly among the finest of any player in the history of his position. He is also one of the most decorated footballers of all time, and the most decorated of the modern era, having won 42 trophies in total, perhaps most notably his 3 Champions Leagues. An 8-time FIFPro World 11 inclusion, only Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Sergio Ramos and Andres Iniesta have featured more times than him. It would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that in January 2023, Alves was arrested and charged with sexual assault by Catalan police. Alves is accused of raping a woman in a nightclub toilet, who he initially claimed never to have met, until surveillance footage disproved that claim, then claimed that he defecated in the same cubicle as her for 15 minutes, but that nothing sexual had occurred, until that was also disproven by his semen being found on the toilet floor. He then claimed that she had just performed fellatio on him, which was also disproven by semen samples, and in his latest testimony, he reportedly changed his story yet again to claim that he did have sexual intercourse with the woman, but that it was consensual, and that he only lied in an attempt to save his marriage. So, an outstanding fullback, but a pretty vile human being. 0. Honourable mentions. It wouldn't be a HITC Sevens greatest series without something as bleak as what I just talked about, and a set of honourable mentions sandwiched between first and second place. The first right back that I want to shout out is one that I mentioned in the introduction, Gary Neville, who was a fantastic fullback, but was really at his best in the mid to late 1990s and early 2000s in my view, and therefore misses out by virtue of the time parameters more so than anything else. He was still probably the closest right back to featuring, and could easily have stolen in ahead of Maicon. Pablo Zabaleta and Branislav Ivanovic are 2 more exceptional Premier League right backs who did play all of their football post-2000, and there also wasn't much to split them and Maicon. Meanwhile, Dani Carvajal can consider himself unfortunate to miss out, and would probably leapfrog Maicon if I made this video in just a couple of years' time. And last but not least, I think that Lukasz Piszczek is a criminally underrated right-back who was unerringly consistent for over a decade in the Bundesliga and is still playing now in the 3rd tier of Polish football. Just a quick word also for Lilian Thuram, who would have made this 7, though only in 7th, just ahead of Maicon given that he retired in 2008, had I classified him as a right-back. But he played more games at centre-back than at right-back post-2000, and is therefore eligible for the centre-back video, which will be up next in this series instead. Another great reason to subscribe, of course, to both. Enough prevaricating though, it is time for your bloody top spot. Have you guessed it yet? First, Philipp Lahm. In top spot, it is of course Philipp Lahm, and how could it be anyone else? A faultless fullback who could do it all. You could count the number of glaring mistakes that Philipp Lahm made over the course of his entire career on a single hand. Born and raised in Munich, Lahm spent his entire career in Bavaria, but for 2 seasons on loan at Stuttgart, where he honed his skills. Due to necessity, Lahm spent his early years at Bayern playing as a left-back, and his later years, reminiscent of Joshua Kimmich after him, playing in central or holding midfield. The bulk of his career was spent at right-back though, where Lahm was, for roughly a decade, consistently one of the 2 or 3 best right-backs in the world. Nicknamed the Magic Dwarf by Bayern fans, Lahm was clever, athletic, and technically superb. Pep Guardiola once called him perhaps the most intelligent player that he had ever coached, which is saying something when one looks down the list of players that Guardiola has had under him over the years. Lahm doesn't have anywhere near as many FIFA Pro World 11 inclusions as Alves, just 2, but that's because he was always less flashy, eye-catching, and flamboyant. He did the job though, expertly and with little fanfare, and almost never dropped a performance worse than an 8 out of 10. A truly sensational footballer, and not yet very credibly accused of rape, the latter admittedly being a low bar, but ultimately, I think that Lahm is the right choice in top spot. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much, as ever, for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it, even if you disagree with some of my selections. Hit the like button if that was the case, let me know what you would change down below in the comments, and of course, make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, both for this channel and my backup channel, both of which should be on your screens now. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens if YouTube simply isn't enough.